Well, hello, and welcome to this 5-day mini boot camp on how to start to get excited about talking to your animals and help them to heal. Because the beautiful thing is that when we care about the animals and we want to help them heal, we heal ourselves too. So great to see you here, Petro, and welcome everybody. If you don't know me, my name is Sarah Jane, and I am an animal communicator that really specializes in helping people and animals to heal from unresolved trauma so that they can live into a fulfilled, happy, and healthy life. And when I was putting this challenge together, first of all, you might ask, why am I doing this for free? And the reason is very simple, that every day I wake up and I want to get more people to receive the gift of interspecies communication. Because when we can come back to our hearts and recognize that first language that we knew intuitively before we learned the word, everything starts to change. We become more compassionate, we become more empathetic, and we care more. Not just about trusting in ourselves and trusting that we're enough, but trusting in life and trusting in our relationships with other people. So with Black Friday, which is not very common in South Africa, but is a big thing everywhere else in the world, instead of making it a Black Friday special, because we'll end on Friday, I wanted to make this all about love and light and the truth that November and the animals so desperately want us to live into. So I'm so grateful that you're here and taking time out of your busy schedule to join me or listen to this on the replay. And just a few things I wanted to say before we kind of get into the content for today is that I'm here to serve you and answer your questions. So the more you interact, the more that you ask questions, the more I can give you what you want, rather than just giving you a generic sort of overview on animal communications, which you can pretty much read anywhere or visit my huge resource library of videos and audios on my various channels. So we're going to probably go for about 20 to 30 minutes. Those of you that know me know that I don't often keep things as short as I would like, but we'll go until we feel complete. And I'm giving away over $5,000 in celebration of animals and the connection that we have with them, and also just to celebrate the beautiful human-animal bond that is available to us, where animals really come into our lives, I believe, to teach us how to be good human beings. And there are just so many lessons in there. So rather than make this sort of the standard generic how to talk to animals, I'm going to be addressing some of the less spoken parts of what it takes to really trust and to work in the realm of helping spirits and speak to animals or loved ones that have departed, as well as give you some really life-saving fast aid tools, and that'll probably happen on day 3 or day 4. So if you would like to win some of my programs and goodies that I'm giving away, please just follow where you opted in. If you didn't opt in and you're just listening to this because you're part of this tribe, I will post the link again. All you have to do is like the videos, share them, tag your friends to come and join with you, because the more of us that actually are working in the unseen realms and learning or I should say remembering how to talk to animals, I think we can leave the world a better place than we found it. So please share it, tag a few friends that you know will get value out of this, and invite your animal lovers to come in and join us and join the conversation, so that we can really get to, there's a mosquito flying above, really get to be a greater contribution than we are already being in the world. So for today, just remember, one of my favorite sayings is from Chief Dan George, and he says that if you talk with the animals, they will talk with you, and you will know each other. And if you don't talk to them, you will not know them, and what you don't know, you will fear. So what one fears, one destroys, and that sort of brings up the Avatar movie, which made me weep, because that is the kind of connection that I want to live in a world where all living things are treated with mindful regard. And if you're here too, then I know that is something that you want as well. So let's just first consider what it means to communicate with an animal. And later on during the week, we'll go into how that differs from communicating with the spirit of an animal, or connecting with your power animal, or those sort of transient animal guides that come in at certain times of our life to specifically guide us through challenging times. To communicate with animals, or even spirit animals, it doesn't require any specific gifts or capacities. I certainly wasn't dropped on my head or born with any psychic capacities that are different to any of you. It just requires, first of all, a willingness to want to hear what the animals have to say and talk to them. And it also just requires a different way of thinking about communication. It's actually more about a feeling listening than listening with your ears and your eyes and your mind. So it's really about utilizing the five senses that will ultimately activate your sixth, or your spidey sense, as I call it, and being open to receiving what they're trying to convey to us through their physical being or their spirit. So telepathic communications from another species is always very exciting and very interesting, particularly the further away from the human that species is. So all that's really happening, from my insight after working with hundreds of animals over the last 20 years and their people, is that on a quantum level, we're all energy, and there are emissions or frequencies. So their vibrational state of being, or emotions or thoughts, and I do believe that they have brains that are as intelligent as us, regardless of what science says. Elephants, for example, they have one of the biggest brains on the planet, like the whales, because they really are the keepers of the knowledge. And if you look at a dolphin brain, their brains are actually bigger and more developed than ours are. So if you think about interspecies communication, what we're doing is we're like, it's a kind of cognition. So think about it like all these emissions or these frequencies or these states of health, they're just radiating quietly on a quantum level. And of course, they're unseen ways to us humans. And animals see different frequencies that we can't, including the color spectrum of ultraviolet, for instance, which is why you often see them sort of staring out into space, because they can see entities that we cannot see. So if you start to look at, gosh, there's so much I want to give you in such a short time amount of time, but obviously we're not going to get to all of this, but I want to just give you a sort of outline of what that interspecies communication means. It's not woo, it's not it doesn't need to be proved. It just needs to be believed and trusted that it's there. And if you are wanting to talk to animals, or, identify yourself as an interspecies or medical intuitive or animal communicator, all we're saying is that you are setting the intention, you are making the demand, and you are willing to shut out all the external noise, and you are able to make yourself, with practice, it's like training a muscle, to get really, really quiet and centered enough to shut out all the unusual or the usual kinds of 5 sensory information. And let's face it, we're all bombarded with external stimuli that often puts us into a lot of overwhelm, which is why one of the first things I always like to teach, and I'm going to take you through some of the beginning stages of how you can manage your energy in a way to bring your mind down into a state of non-thinking, so that you can create a safe space of peace and calm for yourself and the animal that you're wanting to communicate with. Because let's face it, we all know that when we're afraid, or we are distracted, or we're preoccupied with our thoughts and feelings and emotions, we're not present to be able to receive the information that's coming through. So if you can shut down all of those external sensory overloads and focus on the interior of incoming sensory information and frequency, it's kind of like turning a dial on a radio, where you are fine-tuning your energetic frequency to meet the frequency of another. And this is why often in distance communications, I'll ask for a photograph and the name and the address of the animal, so that, because the photograph, or what we call the witness in biogeometry or radiesthesia, holds the energetic frequency, just like your signature, of the animal that you're wanting to connect to, whether they're living or past. So how I experience the communication myself on a content level has nothing at all to do with how the animal is choosing to send the information to me. It's a matter of purely receiving the incoming unconscious information or data, and then an internal translation process happens. And this is why it takes practice. It takes time to exercise that muscle of not getting lost in translation. And I think one of the key things when you're just starting out is to be willing to get it wrong. There is no right or wrong. Animals don't judge. They're incredibly patient, and they're incredibly generous, because they're so excited that finally we're listening and we're wanting to know what their needs are and how they're feeling. And it just gets better with time. So just know that the incoming intuitive data, and at least this is my experience of it, and a lot of the people that have gone through my animal communication classes, is that my intuitive data runs against my mental database of all my stored life experiences, my stories, the smells, the tastes, the words, the mental images in my database, in my filing system. And that when one of those things in my file, in my data bank, registers in my mind, when the closest match is found that matches what the animal is sending me, then a word might pop into my head. And it doesn't mean, for example, that if I'm connecting with an elephant and he says to me, green tree, that I just get the mental image of a green tree or the words green tree in my mind as the internal human translation process. But if I had asked and got more specific and very exact about my questioning, and perhaps asked the elephant, what is your favorite kind of food, they have sensed the energy of my question and are showing me the truth and the quantum way, which is the image of a green tree. And they might get very specific about the type of tree or the bark of a tree or the fruit of a tree, So it really is about just fine-tuning it and also not censoring, not holding anything back. I feel like our responsibility as the receivers of the information from the animal world, and especially when we're dealing with delicate subjects that oftentimes people don't want to hear. And that actually, by the way, is another reason why a lot of times people don't want to hear what the animals have to say, because they feel like it'll be too painful or they won't know what to do with it. And I remember this happening oftentimes in the beginning when I started to do this professionally, that I used to hold back for fear of getting it wrong or being ridiculed or looking stupid, until I realized that I wasn't doing myself, the client, or the animal any favors in censoring the information. So just know that this energy frequency that we're tuning into in the animal's world, it's a universal language between all beings. And in the language that is happening all the time between different species out there, or what we call the morphic field. If you've read any of Lynn McTaggart's books, she describes that really beautifully. So just know that it's not just about us humans, human animals that are connecting with non-human animals. It's happening in nature all the time. We just got a prefrontal lobe where we want to make meaning out of everything and hold ourselves back, whereas the rest of nature is just always looking at how can I thrive. There's no negatives in nature. And it's happening out there the whole time between the plants and the animals who are browsing, and between the birds and other animals that are alerting them to dangers. We see this with those beautiful acacia trees that when they're touched, they close their leaves and send out this pheromone to all the other acacia trees that they're animals that are going to be eating them. So it's very intelligent, and we have that innate wisdom in us ourselves. So let me know if this is making sense, and if you have any questions, please just post them in the comment section. I am watching it. If anything comes up for you or you have any questions, because I really just want to give you a sort of general introduction to a different way of looking at interspecies communication. There isn't, there's no complicated technique that you need to know or a need to be more spiritually advanced to be able to communicate with animals or anything like that. It really is about, just as I said, setting the intention and a willingness, a deep desire to be able to access a quiet enough inner state so that you can hear and listen very deeply beyond the five senses. And in ordinary everyday life, we do have intuitive moments. I'm sure you all relate to thinking about a friend and the next minute she calls you, or you're watching TV or reading a book and you all of a sudden get up and you go to the back door and open the door and your dog is there waiting to come in. So we're doing it. We just want to increase our awareness that it is innate to all of us, and with a little practice and a willingness, you can communicate with your animals. And just imagine, how much of the worry and the guesswork you can take out of keeping your animal healthy, or knowing when they're in pain, or knowing if there's something specific that they're missing, that you could get that information straight from your horse or your dog's mouth. instead of just sort of using those intuitive moments that tend to arise spontaneously, like I said, in times of extreme intensity, when you're worrying about your friend or thinking about somebody, or when your life is in danger. Using telepathic communications is about paying attention to the intuition when we want to be very intentional rather than waiting for it to rise spontaneously. So I use intention to clear myself and to create a connection with the one that I want to communicate with. And then I simply have to be quiet and be still and listen from a felt sense. Making sense so far? No questions? I know I'm going pretty quickly because we're already 20 minutes in, and I still wanted to speak to you about the entities and why that forms such an important part of not just keeping our own energy fields clear and connected and grounded, but how also it can have so many incredible applications if you know how to use to work with the entities and your spirit guides, as well as clear demonic or detrimental energies off of your field or off of your animal's field. And that's one of the first things that I do after I've created or established this beautiful heart-to-heart connection of mindful regard and trust between me and the animal that I want to communicate with. Then you can start to look at, are there entities attached? And the reason why I have a whole series just on entities, it's a 2-day course that's very robust, is because I think everybody should learn how to work with the entities, the helping spirits, and to clear detrimental energies away from our spaces, like our homes or the ground that we're visiting, or off of our animals' bodies or other people's bodies. So often animals, and we're not talking about oversouling here, but just for the point of talking about entity clearing. So clearing the detrimental entities first before you even start a conversation, is because if an animal, for example, has an entity attached to its body, they're not going to be in their right mind. You often see this in people that'll go in for an operation and they get put under anesthesia, and they come out and they're not the same anymore. Imagine how many entities are hanging around hospitals where people are leaving their physical bodies and hanging around because they have unfinished business, or they don't even know that they no longer have a body. So one of the first things that we can do is, if there are entities attached, is to remove those entities. And oftentimes, this is where we see spontaneous healings. Why? Because often if you have been vibrating, or your animal has been in some kind of shock and trauma system, we jump out of our bodies. We're not in the physical body anymore. So it's kind of like your animal or you have a room to let sign flashing above your physical being, and any kind of energy or entity that is vibrating at the same resonance frequency that you were at the time of the trauma or abuse, or let's just leave it at that for now. But any entity that is attracted to that will jump into the body. And oftentimes they'll come in with a disease that they may be passed from, like cancers or anxiety or an addiction. So it's very, very useful, before you even begin to start to have a conversation with another being in a body or without a body, including your animal friends, is to check for entities. And I go through how you can do that in my entity course, and also we cover that in depth in the Being Human Through Animal Communication program that is available on my website. So does it make sense to you how important it would be, or how exciting it could be, if you could also start to work with the helping spirits of the land, of the elementals, the ocean spirits, the great tree spirits, in contributing more back to the earth and to the oceans, and also to raising humanity up. Just going to check the comments and see. Hi, Violet. Hi, Ellen. So no questions so far. Okay, so one of the easiest ways to clear negative or detrimental entities is, first of all, to just ask them, who are you? What are you doing here? If you sort of feel that in the space, a lot of times you sort of see them in your peripheral, or they start messing with your electronics, or they start to, in other beings like your animals or people, they're just not themselves. And this often happens, as I said, under anesthesia, or if the body's gone through shock and trauma. So just for now, if you would like the entity clearing that you can start to use straight away, just type entity in the chat and I will be sure to send that to you. And also, if you want to get into my direct messaging, where I offer lots of additional tools, if you go onto my website and you just click follow or message me off of this page, you'll automatically start getting updates to some of these topics where I go into much more depth. So back to the basics of animal communication. Do you actually start to recognize that you're already using your intuitive spidey senses with your pets? And if you are, just give me a yes in the comments. Because my impression of animal communication or non-human animal awareness is so much more open and unrestricted than human awareness or human consciousness. And I find on an individual level, during telepathic communications, it's a lot more difficult with people because there's so much mental stuff to wade through to get to the real truth of the underlying data or information. And for most of us humans, it's a lifelong journey to find out, you know, who we really are. And you know, animals and plants, they know who they are without a doubt. You know, they're not trying to be something that they're not. They're just being who they are. And they don't have the same barriers and emotional baggage that we do. They don't feel shy or self-conscious about themselves. They're just themselves, and they radiate it. And it's very, very clear and very direct as well. It's like it or leave it. So communication with humans telepathically is possible, but it just gets a little bit more difficult because you've got to get through all these layers of masks and the false personas to get to the real deal of who that person is. And in the same way, animals don't tend to project the future either in the way that we do. They don't worry about the future. And I'm talking about animals in the wild. But they can have current concerns around a future based on past experiences, especially if that animal has had gone through a certain trauma or has reference to that they could be abandoned or hurt again. So I believe that they definitely have a linear, straight running and clear cognition of linear time. Animals do know how to tell the time, especially dogs. And I think Rupert Sheldrake that wrote a book called Dogs Know When You're Coming Home, where he took a whole lot of different individual studies of people and their dogs that knew within, started waiting at the door 10 minutes before their owners actually came in. So they knew because they were tuned into their person and their person was tuned into them exactly when they had started leaving to come home. So, this is very obvious in cases, as I said, where animals have been through trauma or separation anxiety. And if we look at the sort of current pet situation, and I don't even like to call them pets because they're sentient, feeling beings just like we are, and we don't have ownership over them. They come into our lives with their own soul contracts with us, and they come in to teach us and learn with us as well, and have their own experiences with us. So gosh, if you look at that kind of animal that has been abandoned or has been through some kind of very traumatic separation, they would be the kind of animals who would sit and pine or wait at the door for hours because they're afraid that you're not coming back, and that's because they are concerned. So they can cognize future scenarios, definitely. Although the ones more in the wild and more distant to our thoughts and feelings and emotions are not that affected by it. So yeah, what else did I want to say about that? Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to start, but just know that the best way to be a clear and open channel to receive information from the animals and the plants, we call this plant talk in the field of body talk and epigenetics, where we are looking at the morphic field and how everything in our environment does create a cause and effect for our animals, and why energy hygiene and keeping our own energy field clear of any kind of undesirable attachments is so important in keeping them healthy and happy too. So, I think also that if we start to look at sort of future predictions, I love the idea of using imagination to believe that you are already receiving information from the animals, and you're just dialing it in, you're just fine-tuning it yourself. Don't come with the doubts. I think clearing your mind of the inner saboteur voices is crucial if you're going to get clear and present in receiving and also sending messages to your animals. So the best way to do that is to use something like a grounding cord, or what I teach in the trust process, to create a space of calm, clear presence where there is no thought. You just receive the information a lot easier. So when you come with a needy, desperate energy, you'll notice that it becomes more difficult to hear because you're putting all these projections and expectations on yourself. And also the animal feels that needy energy, and it doesn't feel good to them. So they don't really want to be around or try and communicate with you, which is one of the reasons why I love working with horses, because they're such truth tellers. All animals are. They never lie. They never hold back. When they're afraid, they show us fear. When they are curious, they show us curiosity. There's no falsity in it. They're just clear and present all the time. So that's, I think, is a good place to leave it for now. But just know that, in modern times, most humans can't even relate to the concept of open, clear communication with each other, let alone the concept of telepathic communications. And I really believe that for humanity to change things, for humanity to survive in the current times, we really, really need to reconnect with non-humans. And not as a concept, not as sitting behind our computer screens, and not in virtual ways. But ironically, to really get back into a 5-sensory relationship with nature as the way forward. because once we're back in direct relationship with the 5 sensory level, what arises is what we call the sixth sense, or the intuitive sense. And what arises from there is a repatterning of how our minds are working with what comes up. And it's a very expanded, very blissful state of being. And I really think that deep connection to nature is the only way for us to know ourselves again and trust ourselves again and remember who we are. And the animals are the most direct, clear channel as our guides, as our teachers, to get us back there. So just know, you know, it doesn't matter how busy you are, just keep your appointments with yourself. Take 20 minutes out of your day and just go and sit under a tree and connect with your breath. And I think that's one of the most essential and basic and simple ways to really start this process of creating safety so that you can have a conversation with non-human forms, is to just focus on your breathing. Because when you do that, then you're no longer thinking about what's going on in your mind, because you're listening with a felt sense to your breath, to your heartbeat, and everything else just starts to go away. So get out in nature, and I really encourage you to lighten up as well. You know, animals don't like heavy energy. They like us to be light. And when we're too intensely focused on getting it right or trying to hear what they're saying, as I said earlier, it's quite a heavy, dense energy, and it doesn't feel good to them. So being able to stay calm and peaceful, which is what I teach in the 3 Ps of the trust process, you can let the thoughts arise and they just start to float away, because you're being present in a visceral sense with your physical body. And then the exciting stuff happens when you can actually start to know what's your felt sense of your body's tensions and what's not yours. And that is where we start to take all the guesswork out of trying to figure out why our animals are not doing so well, or what's causing their immunity to drop, or for them to get anxious. So just get out there. And another thing that we can do also as adults, and is such a gift, is to just encourage one child in your life. It doesn't have to be your own child, but if we just all took a child and encouraged them to stay connected to their intuition and support and validate the information that they're getting, imagine how different the world will be in their future as adults, if they can stay in a place of mindful regard and deep intuitive connection. They'll have a whole new way, won't they, of relating and being, and to trust that there is so many infinite possibilities of relating non-verbally and connecting with others that have nothing to do with investigation, nothing to do with the information of technology or AI, but real connection. Because if we lose the empathy, and it's already been proven that we are, certain people around the world are being born without the empathy gene. Certainly in Africa, we see that life is cheap amongst people. So how do we get back to our hearts? Well, help others, help them grow the next generation up, and encourage them to tap into their intuition. Go send them on a magic Harry Potter animal communication course, or spend a day out in the field of horses and get curious about what they pick up, because they are so less censored than we are. Oftentimes they will encourage you to know that you're getting intuitive hits that align with what they're getting in a different way of communicating. So I hope that you enjoyed that. As I said, I'm not doing these scripted. I've got a couple of notes here to try and keep me aligned. But if you enjoyed this, please like it, please share it, tag your friends when we start at 8 o'clock every day to come on in and join us on the Facebook Lives. And tomorrow I'm going to talk more to animals as teachers, one of my favorite topics, and how you can start tapping into the souls of your beloved animals, and also discern what's coming from you and what's coming from your animal, whether they're in the physical form or in the spirit. So we're going to touch a little bit more into connecting with animals and spirit, and also how we can connect with the entities of the earth and the oceans to restore more balance and harmony on the planet, which is so needed right now, and how you can contribute your energies to those entities that are working so hard in the unseen realms to restore nature back into a more harmonious and balanced way of being. So if there are no more questions, remember to enter the competition by following the prompts that were on the subscribe opt-in page for this 5-day little boot camp, where we're looking at different ways and different possibilities rather than the sort of standard animal communications that is available to you pretty much anywhere. And let me know what you'd like to hear more of. And if you have any questions, if you listen to this again, let me know if you have any questions. And I'll be happy to answer those after the live. I will be active in here. Petro, I think we do forget to hold it. Absolutely. Yeah, we do, Petro. And I think that's another reason why energy management, having energy hygiene practices in place, rituals, space clearings, and really cleansing and clearing and purifying our energy fields on a regular basis, including evicting any unwanted entities that we've attached or have attached ourselves to when we've gone, out to the shops or from work or from somebody else's projections of jealousy or anger or, emotions or entities, thoughts or entities as well. And I could talk all day about entity clearings and how to work with that. So I think that's a good place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you learned something that perhaps you didn't know. And let me know in the comments below too what your biggest takeaway from today is. The more you comment, the more you share this, the more we can get the information out in the world. And I'm here to serve you and your animals. So let me know what you need, and I'll talk about that over the next 4 days. I only have a very brief, open outline of some of the things that I don't hear a lot of other animal communicators and intuitives talking about. So let me know what you'd like to hear, and I will speak to that, and I'll meet you back here tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Bye.